Hey YouTubers, first of all, I'm sorry for the bad lighting, but it seems like with finals coming, I'm always doing these at like, dark 30. It's not even 1 a.m. yet, this is early. Um, Also, sorry for the hat, but if you watched any of my recent videos, you know that my sunburn is horrific, and I just started peeling everywhere, so I thought it was probably better to look like well, whatever you associate with with baseball hats and glasses. I guess college student struggling with finals, which is fairly accurate. But better to look all scruffy and disheveled rather than like some sort of peeling swamp creature, unless maybe you're into that sort of thing. Um, but anyhow, all the personal appearance whining aside, um, I am here to talk to you about a very, very interesting topic and a very important one today, and that is anal magic. Can I say anal on YouTube? Anal magic. Anal, 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 anal. If I'm deleted later, you'll know why. Now, what do I mean by anal magic? Well, first of all, it's not that. Um, so if you clicked on this because of the title, I'm really sorry. You're about to be horribly disappointed. Um, what I am talking about, though, is probably going to bring me right out of the starting gate by offending someone on YouTube. That being said, I think it's a valid topic, and so I wanted to kind of mention it and see if anyone else had sort of come across the same thing. Um, when I started studying um, Wicca, paganism, I've sort of drifted around for a while, but when I started to look at these sort of schools of thought, uh, a very very long time ago, probably around 1993, 94, there was this sort of old school, and I know there still is, but there's sort of an old school uh, sort of arrangement, um, that everything was very natural and everything was very, very sort of classical and very structured. Um, and there was this opposite school of thought that that things should be accessible and should be affordable, certainly, and flexible. And uh, whether you are a traditionalist or whether you are a neo-pagan fluffy witch or whatever the debate is right now, um, there was certainly, there were pros and cons to both arguments, and I fell somewhere in between the two of them. Um, I believe that things should be flexible and accessible and not cost prohibitive. I think that any spiritual path should be just limiting enough to exclude people who are not really sort of seekers, but not so difficult so as to make things like monetary availability sort of the deciding factor on whether or not something's attainable for someone. So I was very much in support of the, especially because I was in my teens at that point, very much in support of the idea that items and tools and materials should be accessible, and that when you didn't have everything that you would ideally like to have, there were substitutions. Cunningham even was very much in support of substitutions. His book on magical herbs is full of substitutions, but there's been this sort of drift that I've noticed where people have sort of moved flexible over into this other camp of kind of sloppy. I hate to say it, and I know somebody's seething at me right now and, calling me all kinds of names, but um, I don't think that you need, highly structured ritual or rare items again, but I do think that it's important to know what you're putting out there and why. I have noticed this sort of mentality on a few sites that I've been, well, sites, channels is probably a better term, that I've looked at recently, where there's sort of this feeling of it's good enough. It's good enough to put this here. It's good enough to put that there, and it certainly is. I mean, what works for you is what works for you. But in some cases, uh, things have felt a little slapdash. Um, I realize that we're all busy people, but I'm detecting in some cases just a lack of of connection to the things that they're doing. Um, I think that substitutions and flexibility are wonderful. I think that they're great tools. I think that they sort of bring things into the reach of the average person. But I also think that despite the fact that we live in a rushed society, um, we should occasionally slow down. And I think when we're talking about our faith, when we're talking about our enlightenment, it's worth those few extra minutes, those few extra little efforts, to forge a link between what you're doing and what you're doing it with, and what you want to accomplish, and so on. Um, Now, why do I think this? um, I don't think that it's about impressing anyone, because I have seen a lot of people's altars, and they're all very different, and some of them are very beautiful, and some of them are very unusual, and some of them are very minimalist, and some of them are, what have you. But I do think that the goal is to convince yourself that there's a connection there, and I think that this will work. It's like settling. It's like I hate to use this analogy, but it's like going to the bar, or going to a dating service, or going out to wherever people are meeting other people now, and looking around the room and seeing somebody that's not exactly what you want, but you go, that'll work. And we know how well those things work out usually, right? So I think that it, um, it's useful to make sure that what you're putting out there and what you're bringing in are both still in line with your original intent. Um, I think that often we get lost in our rush to achieve something now, and we forget that we're supposed to do the things that we do for purpose. We move with purpose. We do spells, or we do rituals for a purpose, not just, well, it's Thursday. Um, and when something is important enough to do a spell, when something is important enough to observe as a ritual, then it should be important enough to be meaningful, every piece of it, if at all possible, to you, unless it's some sort of emergency, right? Um, I believe that that the person or entity that you need to make this connection to is sort of the court of yourself, is the term that I like to use. Um, Before I use anything, I've had sort of this debate with myself about whether or not that is appropriate. Um, because if there's any doubt in my mind that something is good enough, that something is right, that something is accurate, then I feel like I'm just not content with what I'm doing, and I feel a greater accomplishment. I feel a greater peace when what I'm attempting to do, what I'm working with, what I'm bringing in, what I'm putting out, what I'm what I'm surrounding myself with, when those things are all sort of harmonious, and I've made the case with myself to allow those things. So my point is that if you are finding yourself sort of rushing through what you're doing, and you're feeling underwhelmed by your outcome or by your experience, um, it might be useful to take just a little bit more time and look up correspondences, or to really look for a link between two things, no matter how abstract or how unusual it is. I mean, I've seen people use some truly unusual things in ritual. I myself, for the northern part of my altar, I use a green glass bottle filled with roses from my mother and grandmother's funeral. Well, separate funerals. Um, because plants and green are very earthy, but just because it's deeply spiritual to me. And of course, you're not going to find that item in in any of the the sort of traditional guides, but it is something that's deeply connected to who I am, and most of the things that I'm attempting to do. So I've made that case for myself, and I've made that connection, and it feels truly organic and truly legitimate, and truly um, enriching when I encounter that thing. So anyway, these are just my thoughts on maybe making your life just a tad more anal retentive, to make sure that you spiritually and emotionally feel connected with the majority of things, if not all of the things that you use. Um, and if this does not apply to you, or you think that I am completely full of crap, that's fine as well. And I certainly won't be offended by anyone disagreeing with me. Um, Hopefully, I'm putting something out there that helps someone. And if I'm not, then hopefully I'm not putting anything out there that's discouraging anyone. And if those two things are met, then I am a perfectly happy guy. So until next time, bless.